Body defense. Pollutants and microorganisms constantly enter the body through respiratory system, digestive system, excretory system, and skin. These substances must be destroyed by the body to prevent diseases. Body defense system is a system in the body that protects the body against infections caused by pathogens like virus and bacteria. Body defense mechanisms is needed to prevent the entry of pathogens into the body and attack pathogens that have already entered the body. The body protects itself from pathogens non-specifically and specifically. Non-specific defense mechanisms of the body involve the skin, mucous membrane, secretion of acid and enzyme, as well as process of phagocytosis by leukocytes. Specific defense mechanisms of the body known as immunity involve lymphocytes produced by antibodies. The body defense mechanisms is divided into three lines of defense. First line of defense, second line of defense, and third line of defense. First line of defense, skin. The human skin is made of a tough layer and is difficult to be penetrated by microorganisms. Microorganisms can only get into the body if there is a wound or if the skin is injured. Sweat and sebum secreted by the skin contain chemicals that can kill microorganisms. Mucous membrane. Mucous membrane is a membrane that lines the digestive tract and respiratory tract. Microorganisms that enter the respiratory tract are filtered by nasal hairs and trapped by mucus lining the nasal cavity. Earwax, tears, and vaginal secretions also functions as an antiseptic that kill microorganisms. The diagram shows the first lines of defense: saliva, tears, skin, mucus lining, stomach acid. Second line of defense. Second line of defense involve white blood cells to destroy microorganisms or pathogens that have successfully entered the body through the process of phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is the process of engulfing, ingesting, and digesting microorganisms or pathogens by white blood cells. White blood cell will approach and surround a pathogen. Then, white blood cell will swallow and digest the pathogen. Using phagocytosis, pathogens are destroyed and the body is prevented from contracting disease. Third line of defense. Third line of defense depends on the body to resist certain diseases by defending itself from certain pathogens. This mechanism involves immune reactions. These immune reactions produce special antibodies that are produced by lymphocytes to protect the body from attacks by pathogens and antigens. Antibodies attach to pathogens and cause pathogens to clump together. Antibody is a protein produced by white blood cells into the bloodstream in response of antigen. Antigen is a foreign substance that comes from outside the body and induce the production of antibodies. Examples of antigens are pathogens, toxin molecules, and blood cells from other blood groups. Importance of immunization. Children are more easily affected by these diseases. As newborn babies' immune systems are not fully developed, vaccination is needed. Immunization is an effort to stimulate the body defense against infections in babies, children, and adults by injecting vaccines. Vaccine is a dead or weak antigen that will stimulate the immune system and produce antibodies to fight against specific disease. A vaccine contains antigens obtained from a part or the whole structure of a weakened or dead virus or bacterium. Antigens stimulate the body's immune system, forming immunity against certain infections. Therefore, a baby needs to be injected with a few types of vaccines. There are many types of vaccines given to human. Example of vaccine: BCG is a vaccine that gives protection against tuberculosis. DTaP is the combination of diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. HIV is Haemophilus influenza type B. IPV is inactivated polio vaccine that protects against polio. MMR is the combination of measles, mumps, and rubella. MR is a booster dose to provide protection against measles and rubella. DT is a booster dose to protect against diphtheria and tetanus. HPV is a human papilloma virus. This vaccine is given only for girls aged 13 years old. Dose 2 is given 6 months after dose 1. JE is vaccine against Japanese encephalitis. This vaccine is only given in Sarawak. Table 4.4 shows vaccination schedule in Malaysia. Here got many type of immunization: BCG, hepatitis B, DTaP, HIV, polio, IPV, measles, MMR, MR, DT, HPV, tetanus, JE. So if you can see in the table, there are dose 1, dose 2, dose 3, and booster, and also females only. The table shows immunization recommended for age from newborn until primary 6. Passive immunity and active immunity. Immunity can be classified into two types: passive immunity and active immunity. Both immunities can be obtained naturally or artificially. Antibiotics that we consume are excreted from our body and the dose will become less. Thus, antibiotics should be taken at the prescribed dose and time so that the antibiotics are always at the optimum level. Active immunity. The body produces its own antibodies when stimulated by antigens. Natural immunity occurs when a person recovers from an infection. The immunity lasts long after the infection. During the second time infection, the antibody produced exceeds the immunity level and immunity is achieved. During the first infection, the antibody produced is at a low level and does not achieve the immunity level. Artificial immunity occurs when a vaccine that contains a dead or weakened pathogen is injected into the body and the immune system responds by producing antibodies. The immunity lasts long after the infection. So this is immunity level. First vaccine, second vaccine injection, and here the concentration of antibody in the blood. The body gains antibody from external sources in passive immunity. Natural passive immunity obtained when a baby receives antibody from breast milk or from the mother's blood that flows across the placenta. The immunity is temporary and short-lived, lasts for the first few months after the birth of the baby. Artificial passive immunity obtained when an antiserum is injected into the patient's body. The antiserum fights against pathogens without interrupting the patient's immune system. Antiserum is a clear liquid in the blood that contains antibodies to prevent diseases. The immunity is fast and temporary. So, graph of passive natural immunity. Graph of passive artificial immunity. Strong immune system. There are few causes that weaken the immune system: exposure to polluted air, stress, excessive sugar intake, exposure to pesticides. There are few practices that strengthen the immune system: getting enough sleep and rest, exercising and inhaling fresh air, not smoking and exposure to cigarette smoke, doing period health examination. Now answer formative practice 4.2 in your exercise book 2.